Kind of threw me off a little bit, but I was done. I was about to say thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Bill, your response to this question, please.
Yes, thank you. I think the biggest problem with taking away courtesy busing is the way that it happened. It seemed to surprise a lot of people. And now to fill the gap, we're going to go back to the Board of Estimates and probably ask for more money just to fill that gap. This is why the Students Come First ticket has proposed doing more town halls and neighborhood Board of Ed meetings that go to the people. And we're also proposing measures like participatory budgeting. I think that we have to involve our constituents as we're making these big decisions. And, we're going to do everything possible to make sure that, we don't negatively impact other programs. But the fact of the matter is, we're already going to the Board of Estimates to look for that money. So, it's a key part of the integration plan, and we just have to make sure that our transportation is fully funded, and the Students Come First ticket is committed to doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Will?
Thanks. So the ending of courtesy busing definitely had an impact. Courtesy busing was providing transportation to a subset of our students. There were a lot of students that were not covered under it, but absolutely it did change things for those students. I think we don't know why the FFT committee and why they ended transportation when they did, but we do know that there was an expectation there was going to be more transportation as part of the integration initiative, and I think it should have been put in place seamlessly. The fact that it wasn't is unfortunate. I am very much in favor of the process that's happening right now to look at a comprehensive transportation plan. I do think we have to be fiscally aware. There's been a lot of conversation in this entire campaign of more money for this, more money for that. We only have so much money, even in our tax base. So we have to be, need a balanced policy of how we're going to put this in place to make sure that we are adequately investing in equity and balanced with our pedagogical needs, which are ample. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Ritu, your response?
Thank you. I want to fully acknowledge the hardship that many parents are going through at this time, and recognize as a working parent and as a dual income situation, it is very tough, and I am sorry for the hardships that people are going through. That said, Will Meyer and I are running because we support the faithful implementation of the intentional integration plan. I've been a member of CCR. I've been on these conversations for the last 12 years. This community has fought incredibly hard for this integration initiative. We must do everything to make it successful at this moment. We support the current structure of the district assigning children to their schools. We know that when choice is introduced into the model, that sometimes, leads to situations where you don't receive the outcome that is desired, which is integrated schools. And so I support the current system. I support, moving forward with this long overdue integration program that's required by our law. And any efforts to dismantle it would not be part of my platform if I'm elected.
Thank you, Ritu. Nubia. Oh, I'm sorry. Nubia, your response to this
Yes.
question.
As my slate said, Black and lower socioeconomic students are traveling longer distances, so there's an equity issue there. And as Bill said, we believe in being in touch with the community. We've spoken to some kindergarten Black parents who are upset, and they're even working less now. Also, special needs children are not all getting dropped off door to door. So we have a lot of issues right now. I was with my son this week at school. It was his birthday. And so I got to read to the class. And while I was there, I heard an announcement. The green bus is just arriving. Now, school had been in session for 30 minutes already. That child is behind to get himself mentally prepared for school with his classmates. So we're hearing parents are also being forced to buy a second car when that wasn't originally in their financial plan. So if I'm on the board, like Regina and Bill, I would advocate to reevaluate hardships for transfers and create an SES neutral portal for SES neutral transfers within the district to support working parents. If we do not rectify our transportation issues here, it will deter working families from this district. Thank you.
Nubia, thank you so much. The next question is directed toward Will Meyer. What do you believe is the role of VOTEC education in our district, and how would you create or advocate for more varied opportunities for students outside of the path to college?
So I think that vocational instruction is certainly an important part of the offerings that our district can give. We're talking about the career and technical education programs, which are part of the New Jersey Student Learning Standards. And you know, our high school right now offers a number of opportunities that hit certain areas in that part of our state curriculum standards. We have, you know, computer-aided design, business management, basic life skills training. Opportunities for more hands-on programs are outside of our high school right now through sites in Essex County, Union County. I think it's important to make those available to students to enable preparing for multiple pathways post-secondary. But what we have to remember is that when vocational education is available in schools, often what we see is that that is one more form of tracking and leveling. And students who might not be assumed to be more college ready are shunted off there. And we have to be really, really careful of that, because those are the same issues that we're already facing and trying to dismantle in our high school right now. So I think providing access to vocational education to make sure that, you know, for students who want to go other pathways and go to technical education or apprenticeships can do that, but every student must be prepared to go to college if they want to and have the same expectations on them.
Thank you, Will. I'd like to hand it to Bill now for your response.
Yes, you know, when I entered the solar industry as a residential installer, many of the guys I worked with were guys that didn't have options after high school. The solar industry provided them a good paycheck and a respectable career with real opportunities for growth. The sad thing is most of us took years going from one job to the next before finding the industry. Today, the district has the opportunity to guide students to these vocations. So the Department of Energy reports we need 1 million new electricians for the growing green economy, which means millions more PV installers and construction managers. The times demand we create a 21st century VOTEC, and I will be incredibly honored to help the district spearhead that effort. We currently have relationships with Essex County and Union County VOTEC. If you don't know about them, you're not alone. The superintendent said on record, we shouldn't advertise those institutions because they would take students away from our schools. We need to make sure students know and provide them in-house. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Regina?
Yes, well, many of you who have spoken to our ticket outside of this forum have already heard Bill speak very passionately about his advocacy for VOTEC. And Nubia and I have considered ourselves very lucky to be alongside of that. You know, we need to recognize that VOTEC and other training programs are needed to meet the needs of our diverse population. Not everyone goes the traditional college route, and we need to make alternative options known and readily available to our students. We have been disappointed that some board members and the superintendent have taken the stance that it's not our obligation to be a conduit of VOTEC or alternate pathways. This mindset doesn't support a well-balanced, child-centric education. Our district has robust partnerships with Union County and Essex County, and we need to proactively and strongly market existing VOTEC opportunities. If elected, I would look to revisit the current policy to ensure we are making this information more readily available and easily accessible to our students and families. Communicating annually is simply not enough, and we as a district should be encouraging all paths, recognizing that a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. Nubia?
So like Regina and Bill said, not every student wants to go to college, or some are better suited for VOTEC or alternative pathways. I've spoken to high school parents, and many of them have said that historically these alternatives are not well communicated, and they feel lost because of that. Regina mentioned once a year talking about this. Our policy 2421 states it should be communicated annually, but is that really enough? We don't think it is. And quite frankly, it's very hard to find this information on the district website. I've learned more about our Union and Essex County VOTEC partnerships by Googling and doing crazy word search, keyword analysis to be able to actually pinpoint where this is on our district website. And it shouldn't be that hard to find. I appreciate that Bill is so passionate about this, and I've learned a lot through him because of it. We will need more people in construction and manufacturing because of this green energy revolution. And as a board member, I will advocate for enhanced communication to make sure students and parents are more aware of these opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Nubia. And Ritu.
Thank you. I support innovative approaches in education, and that includes vocational education. I think that we might be looking at the problem in one particular way, though, of sending our students off to VOTEC schools, which is what New York City schools did to some degree as well. That's a really highly regulated industry, at least in the city, and I think it might be in New Jersey to some degree as well. I think what we should also be considering is how do we bring in those innovative approaches to education to CHS? How do we let our students stay at CHS, but receive the sort of practical on-the-ground training for different things, whether it's woodworking, whether it's stage building, whether it's, engineering or podcasting. I think, those kind of things are important, but I think all students can benefit from it. And the last thing I'll say is, yes, the Essex County Vocational Program is an excellent program. We should be advertising it. Students who graduate from there receive not only their high school degree, but they've also received an associate degree in college. And that is a tremendous value to our county.
Thank you, Ritu. The next question is for Bill Gifford. Do you support the suspension moratorium? Yes or no? If no, what policy would you propose to address the disparity in suspension rates between white students and students of color? If yes, do you believe that we have adequate mental health and social emotional supports in place to support students and address behavior problems in non-punitive ways?
Yes, I really support the spirit of the suspension moratorium. But when I talk to teachers and students alike, they have felt that their feedback has not been considered. Also, one of the things about the moratorium is that when a student does something wrong or there's a behavioral problem, there are these steps beforehand that have to happen leading up to a discipline. That hasn't happened. So many teachers are feeling disarmed, and there's also students who right now just don't feel like they're being listened to, and also feel vulnerable. So I think the first thing that we have to do is we have to engage the teachers and the students who are in the buildings all the time dealing with this disciplinary situation. So I would challenge the next board to make it a district goal to really engage our students and teachers and make sure that we're rolling out the suspension moratorium in the right way. Thank you.
Bill, thank you. I'd like to invite Will to give a response. Will?
Thank you so much. I agree with the suspension moratorium, especially looking at the principle of it. We know that at the time it was put in place, it was looking at data that was coming back, as we started returning to the classroom after the most immediate part of COVID, and seeing massive disparities in suspension by race. Now, I am sensitive to and acknowledge concerns that it was done without a lot of community input. And I think I would not in any way want to roll it back or end it, but I do think it is valuable to get input from teachers to make sure that there's a well-documented process discussing when suspensions are in fact allowed. And I do think that we have an ongoing concern over the availability of mental health resources. Certainly we know right now that we're at risk of losing some of the supports that are in our high school and middle school right now, the loft and the hub, in light of this new hub and spoke model. And so we need to make sure that we're providing adequate resources through that and elsewhere.
Will, thank you. Ritu?
Thank you. Yes, I do support extending the suspension moratorium. You know, research has shown that Black students and students with special needs are disproportionately affected by the suspensions out of school. This is a nationwide issue that's being discussed across the country. Other school districts like Berkeley and Boston have implemented similar moratoriums. And to be clear, our moratorium doesn't apply where a weapon is brought to school, where there's a severe threat. Even under the suspension moratorium, Dr. Taylor reported that Black and Hispanic students were still 3 times as likely to be suspended. And I think that really shows that we have systemic bias in our school system that we need to address. That said, the board has a goal right now of looking at its restorative justice policies. If I'm elected to the board, I support holistically looking at those policies and training our students to become restorative justice practitioners, because we do need a model in place.
Ritu, thank you. Now I'd like to move to Nubia for your response.
Thank you. I support moratoriums, and I believe that the current one needs enhancements to ensure it's being effective. We had a year to make observations and receive feedback, and currently we have an increase in harassment, intimidation, and bullying compared to pre-COVID era. Also, our Hispanic students have incurred an increase in suspensions. In our current code of conduct, there are 4 tiers of possible infractions with restorative justice responses and actions associated with each. But our moratorium does not specify how the tiers of our code of conduct marry with this policy, and also supports mental health. A positive that I will share is that there is a dashboard where we can monitor suspensions broken down by race. I think that's great. If I'm on board, I will advocate for the following: students have experienced suspensions, and teachers to be part of the task force, clarity on how each student is being supported through restorative justice practices, and research-backed solutions for additional support for special education, mental health, and more staff involvement to ensure that a proactive approach is being taken when evaluating the needs of a student. Thank you.
Thank you, Nubia. Now I'd like to move to Regina, your response.
So I don't support it in its current form. I don't support removing students from their learning environment, and I do support restorative practices as a primary means of addressing student conduct. It is unclear to me why a code of conduct that was thoughtfully and collaboratively developed with students, staff, and community members was cast aside for a suspension moratorium that was introduced in a way that lacked transparency and board collaboration. It didn't actually stop suspensions. It didn't get to the root of the problem, and it hasn't adequately addressed disparate suspension risk ratio rates. Right? We're still seeing, like Ritu pointed out, that Black students are still 3 times more likely to get suspended. The risk ratio has increased from 1 to 3 for Hispanic students. And it took away the ability for building leaders who are closest to the issues to determine how to maintain safety and equity in their own buildings. Nubia, Bill, and I are very supportive of the tiered restorative justice practices laid out in the code of conduct, and we're optimistic that the district is open to an empathy-led approach versus punitive approach to working through student behavioral issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. Now I'd like to move to our final question from the moderator. And this question is directed first toward Ritu. What would you say about the school district to a Black family with school-age children considering a move to South Orange or Maplewood to encourage them to move here?
Thank you. That's a very good question. I would say that our community has its challenges like all other public schools across this country, but this is a community that welcomes you. This is a community that wants you here. This is a community where I would be proud to have your child in my classroom, and where my student would benefit and all students would benefit from your presence. We owe our Black families a huge debt, and we need to ensure that their experiences and their challenges are centered in our school district. And for so long, the Black student experience has not been centered in the South Orange and Maplewood school system. So I think we're finally reckoning with the past. We're not perfect, but we are we are implementing changes. The Intentional Integration Initiative is one display of our community's values. Getting rid of tracks and levels is another display of our values. Participating in implementing the Amistad curriculum is another display of our values. Continuing to push for more data transparency and asking for aggregated data on how our Black students fare in our schools is another display of our values. And we will continue to support our Black students in this school, and we must not fail them anymore.
Thank you, Ritu. Nubia, your response?
Yes. So one of the reasons why I came here and what I love about this community and tell all my friends whenever I try to get them to move here is we care about diversity and integration. And that's reflective in our school system, right? We've incorporated Amistad, Holocaust, AAPI, and LGBTQ into our curriculum. And it's amazing that we are doing this for our children. There's still so much hate in this world, and we're lucky that we have organizations like the Community Coalition on Race to educate our community, and even this diverse board that we have for our Board of Ed. I talk about the Coalition on Race a lot because it's very unique to the rest of this country. And if you look at Dr. Gilbert's Culture and Climate Survey, we learned that even Columbia High School staff want to continue to add more topics or people from a variety of cultures and identities. And that speaks to the dedication that we have here at our schools to make sure that our curriculum mirrors the diverse population that we have here. Thank you.
Thank you, Nubia. I'd like to turn things to Regina now for your response.
Yes, I want to echo Ritu's, one of her first comments was that the community is so welcoming, and I would 100% agree with that. I mean, you know, back when my husband and I were decided to move to the suburbs, we knew we wanted to live in a community where we could have a reasonable commute, you know, one that was as culturally diverse as the neighborhood we are currently living in, and as products of public schools, one that had a great school district. You know, as a multiracial family, it was really important that we raise our kids in a diverse community. We are lucky to have found that in Soma. And yes, we do have our challenges, but we are starting to make progress in terms of addressing the diversity, equity, inclusion, especially within our school districts. We've made strides by passing the Access and Equity policy back in 2015, and finally the Integration Initiative in 21. We do still have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do in terms of the curriculum, in terms of teacher supports, but as a community member, as somebody who has been living through all of this in the recent years, I am very encouraged as to the work we're doing to make sure that all families feel welcome here in Soma. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. Bill?
Yeah, you know, New Jersey is the most segregated state in the US. That's just a fact. This town is no oasis. With that said, there is an ideal of MAPSO that is cherished. The idea of diverse communities with good schools that afford every child the opportunities to succeed. You don't find that just a few towns over. So what I would say to Black parents is you're going to have to be a fighter. You're going to have to continuously advocate for your child, and there's no sugarcoating that. But I will say, you know, as you know, a product of Maplewood, it's the best experience that a child could have, and that's why my wife and I moved back. So, you know, but they're going to have to be a fighter and advocate for their children. Thank you.
Bill, thank you. And finally, Will.
Thank you. I would echo, first of all, what Ritu said. Our community is welcoming. We are intentional about our diversity. You know, look, I grew up in a very white community, and that is not what my wife and I wanted for our kids. And we moved here knowing, number one, that it was a much more diverse and inclusive space. And number two, we moved here while the district was dealing with multiple lawsuits and you know, complaints with the Office of Civil Rights regarding all of our race issues, and with an integration plan pending. And we said, okay, we know this district understands the issues it has. We do have segregation throughout our state. There are major issues. Our district and our high school is not unique. But what's unique is that we are finally dealing with these issues. And what I would tell a Black family moving to town is, we've got your back. The town wants to make this better. And there are initiatives happening right now in our district and in our board to do that. And, you know, we want you here.
Thank you, Will, and thank you to all of the candidates. That concludes the portion of our program that is questions from the moderator. Now we're going to open things up to the community. As a reminder, the procedure for this part of the evening is please submit your question via private chat directly to me. I'm Tegan Color. You can search for my name so that you don't have to scroll through all 100 and some people who are online. We'll be filtering through the questions. We won't be able to get to all of them, but we will do our best to ask a plurality of them. We have about 30 minutes. For the candidates, when we submit the questions, we'll ask the person who originally submitted it to ask it to you directly. You will have 1 minute to respond, and we'll go through in alphabetical order just as we did before, or reverse alphabetical order. So folks, the candidates are welcome to jump in when they are ready to respond, and I'll try and call on a diversity of folks. Okay, so our first question from the audience is going to be from Shannon Cuddle. Shannon, if you could unmute and ask your question, please. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. So I thank you to the committee tonight, and I thank everyone who's participated. I think that's always great for making sure that we have a dialogue. So my question is, if I may, it's a little bit extensive, but please give me a little bit of a leeway. So New Jersey has affirmed transgender rights and transgender supports in New Jersey, and our current BOE policy supports LGBT students, trans students on multiple levels. And due to what is current in our climate across the country and the state of New Jersey, want to ask all of the candidates, do you support our current trans and LGBT student policy? And also, do you support the current 2020 state BOE alliance of affirming LGBT, supportive LGBT, inclusive sex education? And do you support trans students in our schools and communities? So thank you.
Can I ask if there's a candidate who'd like to? Ritu, I see you've unmuted. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. Sorry, I just raised my hand like we're in a classroom.
That's fine.
Thank you for the question, Shannon, and thank you for your service on the board. Absolutely, I support our trans students in our community. I support the current policies that we have in place, and I support the LGBTQI sex inclusive education that should be fully implemented in our schools. I think you were right to pose the question as a hypothetical, because even though we live in this oasis or this wonderful bubble of inclusivity, towns near us, their Board of Ed races are focused simply on this issue in the state of New Jersey. They are fighting as close as Basking Ridge over whether or not they should incorporate this curriculum. And so it is a question that should have been asked, but I fully support our trans families and any trans students. You are welcome here, and we will continue fighting the fight for you.
Thank you, Ritu. Another candidate who would like to answer? Will, please go ahead.
Yes, thanks. Likewise, I'm going to echo Ritu, showing that we acknowledge the identity and existence of trans individuals and LGBTQ individuals in general in our community is so extremely important. I also thank you, Shannon, for so much for your participation on our board. Representation matters so much. I think that the policy that we have in place for transgender and non-binary students is really important, and having that student-centered approach, acknowledging a student's identity and their ability to self-designate their identity, their pronouns, etc., not enforcing the dress code more strictly or differently on those students, and allowing them equal access to opportunities by their chosen gender is, I think, very important. And we need to constantly monitor that to make sure that we are continuing to protect and support trans students.
Thank you, Will. Bill, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Nubia, cut you. I just wanted to say that we fully support, our trans students. As someone who has family in the LGBT community and went through Columbia, it was a very rough time in the early 2000s. So it's great to see that the district is now taking those steps to get ahead of that and support those students. I will say that, as I've said before about having town halls and neighborhood board meetings, I think, there's probably ways that we can strengthen our protections. And I think that we can always be doing that. So, we're fully supportive of this community, and we'll make sure that when we're on the board, we'll do everything we can to protect and support them. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. I apologize before Nubia. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. I agree with everything that everyone has said so far. The one thing I would like to add on is that I want to advocate for these conversations to continue at home. So, for example, the LGBTQ enhancements in our curriculum, it's great that we have them. And I know we have Atlas now, and parents can go online and access these curriculums per grade. But I would advocate for teachers to be sending information, appropriate language and content home with the students so that these conversations can continue with their children outside of school. And it will also encourage them to think about how they can incorporate this into their everyday life when it comes to their friendships and the decisions they make. Thank you.
Thank you, Nubia. And Regina?
Yes, I also want to echo and Shannon, thank you for your service on the board. Pretty much just like everybody else has said, you asked, I think, 3 questions. Yes, yes, and yes, fully support all of that. I tried to write them down, but I couldn't catch it. I do want to take this time to kind of like look at this a little bit holistically, and how we as a district will continue to iterate and evolve our curriculum. Amistad, API, LGBTQ+, special needs, Holocaust, especially with everything that's going on right now. We seem to be taking a surface level approach, and we need to go deeper and build the infrastructure that is actually adopted and properly taught. As board members, we need to hold the superintendent accountable to ensure that all curriculum is properly integrated and not just as an enhancement. Because at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, what is the student experience in this? And do they see themselves reflected in the curriculum? Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. Next, I'd like to call on Yona and Bianca Pimentel. Would you unmute and ask your question to the candidates, please?
Hello, good evening, everyone, and thank you for your time. I'm curious to know what this Board of Ed intends to do, including the Latino and Hispanic community, into both the curriculum and visibility among teachers and students, being that it's the largest minority group in the country and in the metro area. And considering that even the word Hispanic Latino was only mentioned twice this evening, we're here now. What's the plan for us? Why should we stay?
Thanks. I'm going to start with Nubia for this one.
Hi, Yona and Bianca. I think that's a great question. And I know I was one of the people that mentioned Hispanic students when it came to suspensions increases. We do focus a lot on Black students in this district because historically they have been the ones to be most vulnerable. And We've learned from the Coalition on Race demographic reports that we are growing. Our Hispanic population is growing, which is great, along with our Asian population. And so when it comes to the academic achievement gap, you've looked at the data, Hispanics are right up there for also struggling with the pass fail rates for level 3 and level 4. And so we need to do better with our data. We need to do better with our analysis. We can't really create solutions to problems if we're not digging into the data. And it is a weakness that we have in this district. So really it's looking at the problems, not putting up Band-Aid, not window dressing, but actually looking at the source of issues of our Hispanic parents and having town halls with them. Like Bill said, we want to connect with you. So, being able to have town halls and talk to parents and figure out what their experience is like with their children and then finding solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Nubia. Ritu?
Sure. So hi, Yona and Bianca. Thank you for sharing your question. When I first moved here, actually, I felt like there was more of a focus on Hispanic students, in particular on our English language learner students, though, not necessarily on the overall population. That said, I think we can take an approach out of the HR consulting I do, and similar to ERGs, can we create a town hall that's specifically driven to our Hispanic population and our student population? How are we incorporating books that are reflective of the robust literature that our Latinx authors have written? How are we ensuring that our students see themselves in the curriculum? And it shouldn't just be about Hispanic Heritage Month, right? It has to be overall incorporated into the overall curriculum so that your students are not othered.
Thank you, Ritu. Will?
Thank you so much. I echo Ritu. We just ended National Hispanic Heritage Month a couple weeks ago, and I know that PTA's had a couple events about it, which is great. But it is so important that we not be giving lip service to our communities that have been historically underserved with piecemeal actions like this. We talk about the Amistad curriculum, the Holocaust curriculum, the LGBT curriculum, the AAPI curriculum. We can't just create little separate break-off curricula to tack on. We need to make sure that we are addressing in a holistic way the very multicultural basis of our community, and that absolutely includes the Latino and Hispanic population. Certainly within the integration initiative, the numbers of Hispanic students being integrated is being tracked, and it's very important that we even out those numbers as well. So it is crucially important that we're addressing the needs of Hispanic families as part of our community, and we want you here as well.
Thank you, Will. Bill?
Yes, I really appreciate this question. It's actually dear to my heart because my wife is Brazilian and my son is bilingual, and we are sincerely frightened that he will lose his ability to speak both languages confidently as he goes into our district. I think right now that we have to dedicate ourselves to nurturing secondary language early. And it is my hope that we actually start teaching Portuguese, which, Brazil is the second largest continent after the United States. And we are not teaching it at all. So I hope that we are teaching, Spanish and Portuguese very early, not just for those bilingual kids, but it also gives, it also gives many of us an appreciation for those languages, and language is culture. So through language, we really learn to appreciate these cultures even more. Thank you.
Bill, thank you. And Regina?
Yes, thank you so much for that question. You know what, I'm going to apologize because in my response to the previous question, I kind of talked about taking a surface level approach as we think about curriculum, and I identified Amistad, AAPI, special needs, Holocaust, LGBTQ+, and I left that out. And I apologize for that. We need to be addressing all of our populations. As someone raising a multiracial family, as somebody whose children are half Cuban, it is also a concern of mine in this community that we don't properly address it. And, I think, Will and Ritu actually made a great point that, we just finished celebrating we do cultural heritage months, but frankly, that's not enough. It needs to be ongoing. And this coming from an Asian American who is currently being celebrated, for the next month. And frankly, that's not enough. And we need to continue to ask ourselves what the students' experience in this is and if they see themselves reflected in the curriculum. Thank you.
Regina, thank you. Now I'd like to open things up to community member Doreen Oliver. Doreen, I'm putting your question in a private chat to you because you submitted several, and I am giving you the question that I'd like you to ask to the candidates, please.
Hi, thank you. My connection is wobbly, so if you cannot hear me, let me know, and then I'll place it in the chat. So I know there's a lot of concern and discussion about Black and Brown children and the achievement gap. And, we have discussed tonight about how, talking about that with regards to transportation to school, or we've talked about, focusing and prioritizing the curriculum. But what I want to understand from all of you is to, please advise how the focus on curriculum at the elementary school years will improve outcomes for students of color and individuals with disabilities, because I have both students of color, that's children, and I have a child with disability. If you don't also include professional development with regards to preventing biases in instruction, because Black and Brown children in some special needs families are leaving the district often because they are not treated well by teachers and administrators. And this happens as early as kindergarten, because I've been in the classroom as a volunteer and I've seen adults treat Black and Brown children abominably. And so this is a real struggle. And so what I want to understand, how will you address these biases, which was documented, at least at the high school level, by NPR reporter and SOMA resident Nancy Solomon in 2009. Will this be a priority for you, especially as it is, I believe, the next part of the Intentional Integration Initiative?
Thank you, Doreen. Let's start with Bill. Go ahead.
I really appreciate this question. It's been something that's really on my mind a lot. To be honest, we have implemented the Amistad curriculum in name only. If we are going to implement these curriculums in a real way, we need to require, or at the very least, strongly encourage staff to take the necessary professional development in order to teach it. This isn't happening. And this is low-hanging fruit. The New Jersey State Bar Foundation has free workshops available for educators. Dr. Stephanie Harris, Executive Director of the Amistad Commission, holds free professional development over the summer. And in our backyard, we have Dr. Kelly Harris at Seton Hall that could be helping us, but we're not reaching out to any of them. With that said, if we're implementing Amistad and not having teachers do the professional development required to teach it, we're implementing in name only. We need to move from compliance mindset into an innovation mindset as we move our curriculum forward. That starts with the board and the administration talking about teaching and learning as the cornerstone of every meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Will?
Thank you. This is so crucially important. We look right now at our integration plan, and we are seeing very good numbers. We're in the second year of it right now, as far as balancing out students of different races, ethnicities, and incomes in our schools. But if we don't have teachers prepared who understand the needs of working in a culturally competent way with a diverse and integrated class, we're going to see major problems. We have professional development that's being provided as part of this initiative, but I've heard from teachers that it's real basic. We need to make sure that we're giving very good, strong anti-bias training, and that goes just as well for special education. We need to do so much more in making sure both that our curriculum incorporates visibility for students with disabilities and understanding neurodiversity, and that teachers are being trained in not just special education teachers, but every teacher understanding neurodiversity and how to work with special needs populations, and making sure that we are not intersectionally putting race biases into special education determinations either.
Thank you, Will. Ritu?
Sure. So, I mean, I think first, thank you for the question, Doreen. It's a question I think about a lot. You know, as someone who actually conducts diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings, the first thing I tell my clients is this is not a magic bullet. I can give you a baseline of common terms. I can get you to see the system of systemic bias and how intersectional our approaches need to be. But the hard work needs to continue in the workplace. And for us, the workplace is the schools, right? So what are things we can do that are innovative that don't cost as much? For example, teachers could be instructed to create book clubs where students see themselves in the books that they're reading. So they're encouraged to read. And I see that happening in my daughter's 3rd grade classroom right now. Teachers could be given additional tools because not everyone learns in the same way. So we need to continue to upskill the teachers that we do have who are already working hard to continue to live up to the values we have for our community.
Thank you, Ritu. Nubia?
Thank you, Doreen, for this question. I've lived it in the past and still today as an adult when it comes to trauma. And I am a mental health advocate that cares a lot about this. I've received and administered DEI training. And what I notice is that it's missing a component about mental health and intergenerational trauma, which is something that I've studied for some time. I'd advocate for looking at the whole child inside and outside of the classroom to improve, as well as improving the staff's awareness of mental health. Intergenerational trauma was first studied by Holocaust survivors. And a recent professor at University of Connecticut found that she's able to measure and assess anxiety related to racial discrimination. And guess what she found out? It has higher rates of uncontrollable hyperarousal, feelings of alienation, worries about future negative events, and people perceive others as dangerous from this trauma. So teachers need to recognize the signs of this in their students and know best practices for supporting students from marginalized communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Nubia. And Regina.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question, Doreen. So, you know, I think we talk a lot about anti-bias training, and don't get me wrong, that definitely needs to be a part of it, but it's certainly not enough, especially right now. Getting it once a year is certainly not enough. I think we need to take it a step further. And, you know, as research shows, that standalone anti-bias training is not going to change long-term behavior. So we need to look at this holistically, thinking about integrating training in a more comprehensive diversity plan that involves teachers and staff in reviewing practices and structures that can promote bias. In talking to some of the teachers in our district, it's clear they aren't involved in the decision-making process, and in my opinion, they absolutely should be. Research shows that a more engaged staff is a more productive staff, and we need to take these specific measures to improve the overall climate and culture in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. Next, I'd like to call on community member Amanda Burns El Hassoni. Amanda, could you unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
Yes, I have a son who, I mean, we're a multiracial family, and you know, we're looking at the policies here in the school district, and there's nothing representative of the Muslim population. I'm wondering what your ideas are for giving Eid al-Fitr off. I feel like this is a really, you know, this should be a precedent. I mean, this is going on in many school districts throughout our, you know, the Essex, you know, county and beyond, and New York City and what have you. I want to know where you stand on giving Eid al-Fitr off. Thank you.
Thanks. Let's start with Will for this one.
I'm wholly in favor. It is a hugely important day in the Muslim community. And I think that we should, you know, it's right in the area where we're giving a lot of holidays off anyway. I think that it makes sense. And yeah, I don't object to it. Plain and simple.
Thank you. Thank you, Will. Ritu?
Thank you for your question, Amanda, and we welcome you in our community. I absolutely also support proposing and working with my board colleagues if I'm elected to ensure that Muslim holidays are recognized in our community. As a Hindu who just celebrated Diwali yesterday, I would also encourage our board colleagues to work on that. You know, our community grows stronger when we recognize these beautiful holidays in the multicultural community that we have. And I would love for my kids to learn more from your kids about their cultural customs. And so, you know, giving a day off is not just for the students who observe it, but also to teach our students about the community that we live in.
Thank you, Ritu. Nubia?
Thank you. Well, I actually was raised in a Christian Muslim household, and I know what it feels like to not always be understood about religions that are different, because at that time in the 80s, there wasn't much awareness where I was from down south. So thank you, Amanda, for this question. I definitely support that. And to Ritu's point, what else can we add? You know, we need to mirror the values that we have in our schools and our community. And by staying in touch with the community, we learn things like this. You know, that's one of the reasons why our slate created the community survey, because we want to hear from residents, from parents, from teachers that are interacting with our students. And that's only how we're going to continue to improve and grow as a community. So thank you.
Thank you, Nubia. Regina?
Yeah, I echo everybody's statement that I absolutely would support it. And I mean, I think we need to be, again, thinking about it holistically. You know, Ritu mentioned Diwali yesterday being celebrated. I didn't even realize my son's preschool friend, his older brother's in the Milburn district, and they had off. You know, I think we obviously have to be very cognizant of how we celebrate. You know, there are so many cultures and so many religions that reside here in this community, which is amazing, and one of the reasons that I moved here. And so, you know, days off is absolutely something to consider. And I also, again, I keep going back to like the holistic approach to our curriculum and integrating it so that the students are actually seeing it in what they're learning. But I do think that this is an appropriate time to just kind of really reiterate that, you know, we as a district need to be doing a better job in terms of integrating the curriculum. Thank you.
Regina, thank you. And Bill?
Yeah, you know, on the campaign trail, I've spoken to many families, some from Nigeria, Iran, and this was a question of theirs, and I fully support that. I also think that there's probably things we can do for anti-bias training, not just with our teachers, but even our students. You know, we know that there have been some Muslim students, even when I went to Columbia, that, you know, experienced some harassment, you know, for their beliefs. And we have to do everything possible to make sure that those students feel accepted, safe, and comfortable. Thank you.
Bill, thank you. Now I'd like to call on community member Jeffrey Bennett. And Mr. Bennett, I'd like to invite you to ask the candidates your first question that you submitted, and I can put it in the chat if need be. If you could unmute yourself, Mr. Bennett. There's the question for you.
Hello, if you're elected to the Board of Education, would you support using parental ranking to assign students to various elementary schools instead of the proximity assumption that's in the algorithm as it is?
Thank you very much. And for this one, I'd like to start with Regina.
Thank you for that question. You know, one of the most interesting things about this campaign trail is learning actually about the history of the intentional integration plan and what had been approved by previous board iterations and what it is today. And so for many of you that might not know, it was similar to a Montclair model in which parents would have been given controlled choice and ranking their schools based on and of course, it would also throw into, how the distance you are to the school and then your rankings. Now, here's what I will say. This district has a history of throwing Band-Aid solutions to a problem. So while I agree that the integration plan has a lot of work to be done, and I think that there are things that we could be done in the immediate future, I don't want to necessarily say that, right off the bat, we're just going to change how the whole plan is being rolled out. But I think that we take kind of a slower approach into thinking about how we are better distributing our students across the different schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. Bill?
I think the most important thing we can do is continuously engage the community as we implement the III. We have to figure out what's working and what's not. When Dr. Fakar was creating the III, he was having town halls all over SOMA. One of the BOE's most important jobs is policy governance. The III policy required 2 community feedback surveys to be implemented in January and May. These were not completed, and the current board has yet to hold the superintendent accountable. I'm happy to see that the latest district's goals do include experience surveys for this school year, but it's a year too late. He's supposed to send out the next surveys in January, and if I'm on the board, we'll hold him accountable to do just that. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Will?
Thank you. First, I think it's important to acknowledge the integration plan is so crucial for our district from, I think, a moral point of view, an educational point of view, and a legal point of view, as far as the importance of making sure that our schools get integrated. We have had the benefit of extensive research, numerous reports from Dr. Alves and Ms. McCardle regarding the various proposals as far as ways to integrate our schools and looking at the models used by other programs. I am from a field where we turn to experts and we trust experts. I'm not coming in to solve something looking, having my policy and saying we're going to do this. So in hearing some folks talk about wanting choice, some of us want to create a transfer portal, there's a lot of possibilities. I'm going to go with the experts. I think we have an issue right now. Adding transportation is going to address a lot of the issues we see, and I want to look at the data for a little more time and see what Dr. Alves has to say. And if the board needs something different, we look at something different.
Thank you, Will. Ritu?
At the current moment, I don't support a parental choice element. History has shown us that when parental choice is introduced, resegregation occurs. We've tried parental choice in this district. That's what Seth Boyden was meant to be, but our schools were still segregated. That's why we needed to run the intentional integration initiative. I do think that we should reassess and look at the proximity algorithm, as Will Meyer said, and we need to continue to reassess. I also think that this particular year is not the type of year that you can use, because once you uncouple Delia Bolden and Marshall, I assume that some of the problems our community is facing might not be as insurmountable as they seem right now. I think the final thing is that we know that data studies show that when choice is introduced, parents inevitably use their privilege to outgain the system, and we will go back to segregated schools.
Ritu, thank you. And Nubia.
Thanks. Many people might not know that, actually first, Jeffrey, thank you for your question. I'm sure it's on a lot of people's minds. But I want to remind people, our district is one of the worst examples of integration in schools in America, as evaluated by our Department of Education and ACLU. So I'm happy that we have this integration plan, and there's going to be bumps along the road. It's not going to be a perfect fit right away for everyone's needs. And I want to remain focused on getting feedback from parents, getting these experience surveys out, because they didn't go out when they were supposed to last year. And then advocating for how we are going to continue to support diverse learners. If you look at the current integration plan, it's not clearly spelled out. And to Doreen's point, there is bias in our district. And we need to really dig deep and understand how we can rectify that, because moving children around based on socioeconomic and race is only half of the problem. There's a whole other issue that we need to resolve here. Thank you.
Thank you, Nubia. Next, I'd like to call on community member Kia Edwards. Kia, would you mind unmuting yourself and asking the question that you posed to me?
Yes, absolutely. Good evening. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
I'm here with my partner, Daniel Gettle. We are both Maplewood residents. We've been here for just about 2 years now, but I've always admired the town. Everybody on the call seems lovely. You're all amazing. I'm able to gauge more differences, I guess, as the conversation has gone on. I sent this question out maybe about 30 minutes or so ago, so the answers have diverged a bit, which is great. I just wanted to take some time to go through each candidate so they could draw a contrast between their policy approaches and priorities based on their opponents in a respectful, wonderful manner, of course. And that's all.
Thank you, Kia. I'd like to start with Nubia for this question, please. Nubia?
I know you were going to start with me. Oh my goodness. It's a great question, and it's one to answer and hard to answer in 1 minute. I would say for myself, one, I am a former educator. I taught English for a few years outside of this country. And so I'm always going to be looking at curriculum and learning. And I'm going to be looking at it from a critical eye because I have 2 young children in the district. I have a 4th grader and a 2nd grader. And one of them already has had intervention, and I wasn't that impressed with the intervention services she had. So I'm going to be really, really focused on the early years, because research has shown that if you don't, and if you can't course correct by the time they're in 3rd grade or around that time, then the child is going to continue to have challenges. Also, I've mentioned before, I'm a mental health advocate. And I think that we can't do status quo anymore, even for our teachers. They get left out of this mental health crisis conversation. And if our teachers are not taken care of from a mental health perspective, then they can't do a good job of supporting our students. And so we need to focus on that as well. So you'll hear me talk about mental health a lot. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Nubia. I'd like to turn to Regina for your response.
Yes, thank you for the question. I just want to reiterate kind of what Nubia said. And frankly, it's the reason Bill, Nubia, and I kind of came together. I mentioned in my opening statement that we started our candidacies as individuals. And as we had been going through the early days of the campaign period, talking to lots of community members, recognizing that we all were kind of like, we all had the common theme of we need to put our students first, and we need to put an emphasis on curriculum and learning in the early years. As a mom with 2 young children, I see this right now. I started in the district virtually, and especially the first kindergarten year being very virtual, we were lucky to have the supports of wonderful teachers to, keep my daughter, up to where she needs to be. But I mean, I think we can all agree that a lot of students, it didn't work for a lot of their students. And I think we need to be really looking at what we're doing, what interventions we're putting in place in the earlier years so that we can achieve better outcomes in the later years. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. Bill?
Yeah, my policy story goes back to when I was 18 years old and I decided to run for the Board of Education. I was writing a sociology paper, actually, and, I was in some very low-level classes in math, and I was in some high ones for, journalism, English. And I saw this disparity. I went to some classes, everybody was Black except me. And then I went to others and it was very white. And so a part of digging into this, I actually asked the district for the numbers on leveling broke up by graphic. At that time, that information was not even public. And so I got it, and the numbers were just horribly astounding. The lowest level classes were over 90% Black enrollment. And this is when we had 50%. So what I want to do, just like I'm doing, today, is I want us to get to the ideal of Maplewood. The reality is we're not there, and I'm going to do everything as a board member to make sure that we get to that ideal. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Will?
Thank you. Thank you, Kia, so much for the question. I think, look, we've got a great slate of people here. I'm very happy to be with all four of my candidates, including my running mate, Ritu Pancholi. I think what I would say sets Ritu and myself apart is we have both had a lot of time dealing with school districts directly. Ritu, let her talk about herself, but she served many years in a school district and really knows the ropes from the inside. And I've spent the better part of 2 decades litigating against school districts and negotiating with school districts to work on the issues of students with disabilities. Having that experience is, I would argue, invaluable in getting onto a board and adequately supervising a superintendent on day one, both in crafting goals and being able to evaluate the degree to which those goals have been met. And policy-wise, I have such a concern about the way special education is being provided in our district, and I have about 200 ideas of things that I want to get on the board and do. So that's my ambition.
Thank you, Will. Ritu?
Thank you, Kia, for the question. I want to echo my running mate, Will Meyer's comments as well. I feel so blessed and lucky to be running on a slate with Will. Outside of being a subject matter expert on special education, which this district could really use, he is a genuinely nice guy that I like to spend a lot of time with. And so I think we'll make a good pair on the board because we've already developed a lot of chemistry, right? And so, and I feel that way about others running as well. But I will say that what differentiates us is this is our life's work. We've done this in the schools. We've worked with superintendents. I've worked with principals and evaluating teachers. I've looked at, when the Department of Justice Office of Civil Rights sued the New York City schools for not being handicap accessible, I was the lead attorney on that case. And so I have experience in the nuts and bolts of how to hold a superintendent responsible. And that is the key board's responsibility.
Thank you, Ritu. Based on time, that brings us to the end of our questions from the community segment. We know we didn't get to everyone's questions. We apologize if you asked a question that we weren't able to ask due to time. Now we're going to ask each of our candidates to give their closing remarks. And each candidate will have 2 minutes to give their remarks. And we'd like you to answer the following question. How will you personally navigate difficult working relationships to find effective, respectful ways to work together to benefit our students? And how will voting for you ensure equity for all students? And your closing comments can encompass this question. So let's start in reverse alphabetical order and start with Nubia. You have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Thank you. So thank you, Community Coalition on Race, for hosting tonight, and to everyone who attended. So well attended tonight. At one point, I considered moving from this community. And I did that because I was worried my children would not thrive here in school. And then I decided to stay and be part of the solution by running for BOE. I know our school district can thrive with the right mix of leaders at the top. I believe Regina, Bill, and I complement one another really well. We have backgrounds in people and culture, learning in the district, communications, education, innovation, and our core belief of focusing on education in the early years for children to improve achievement. As for a functional board, in addition to Robert's rules, I believe committing to an internal value system and dedicating ourselves to sticking to it will create a safe space for internal discussions to reach consensus, like listening to all members' voices, admitting when you don't know something or admitting when you're wrong, and creating a no judgment zone while debating topics. Our board should mirror our diverse community. Many voices are needed to problem solve and cultivate a thriving district. I love our community and I want all of our students to excel with a supportive, student-centric environment. A collaborative, functional board of education that stands for accountability and transparency is key to ensuring that happens. We have some challenges here, from teacher shortages to academic achievement gaps and budget constraints, all during a mental health crisis. When I read about these challenges, I ask myself, how are we defining and tracking success for our students? And are we forward thinking enough? I'm proud to be running with Regina Eckert and Bill Gifford on the Students Come First slate. We hope to contribute to the board's ongoing efforts to sustain and grow an integrated and effective school environment that also supports curriculum and learning, achievement, social emotional learning, and high staff morale and retention. Thank you.
Thank you, Nubia. Ritu?
Thank you. Thank you, CCR, for hosting us today. It's no surprise that we have challenges in our schools. Our buildings have been antiquated for too long, even though our student population is increasing. We've had difficulty retaining teachers, and we face a number of critical teacher shortages this year, which means certain students are not receiving the critical education that they need despite the pandemic learning losses. Recent data from CHS shows that a disproportionate number of Black students who received failing grades. Our special education students and neurodivergent students face classrooms without appropriate services and delays in services. The challenges at times feels insurmountable, and we appear to be out of compliance with federal and state law on a number of these issues. But public education is also based on hope for a quality education for all of our students. We must continue to keep striving for a school district that tackles these issues head on. I am not just someone who just complains and raises issues. I am a problem solver. I am a doer, as demonstrated by my years of public service in this community. I'm running for the Board of Ed this year because I know I'm up for the task of working hard. I volunteered over 25 hours of my time for volunteering in numerous capacities in this town as a soccer coach and as the former president of Soma Action. I'm used to asking critical questions as an attorney, and I will use data and transparency to guide our actions and to build consensus with whoever is elected. I am proud to live in this community. I am proud of the work that CCR has done in this community. And if I'm elected, I hope to live up to those values. I'm proud to be running on a ticket with Will Meyer, and I hope that you'll cast your vote for Will Meyer and I, positions 3 and 4 on the ballot this November 8th.
Thank you, Ritu. Will?
Thank you. I want to again thank the Community Coalition on Race and my fellow candidates for appearing tonight. This is an important election because our district has clear issues that we need to improve on. And it is crucially important that we elect board members who have the educational experience to engage meaningfully with the district and hit the ground running, and also the demeanor to engage in good faith with every other member of the board. Ritu and I bring those qualities in spades. Our district's diversity is one of our greatest strengths, but our equity and inclusion have always been lagging a bit behind it. The de-leveling efforts in the high school and our intentional integration initiative in the lower schools are crucial measures to correct this. Ritu and I are committed to ensuring that this work proceeds forward with fidelity and fosters a school system of equity and excellence. And we know that we don't achieve excellence without equity. So it's essential to invest in those students who are not achieving. We must devote sufficient resources for our intervention programs at the high school in order to address the educational debt owed especially to our struggling Black and Hispanic students, and making sure students are leaving our elementary and middle schools prepared for high school. And we need to shore up our special education system to better educate those students who are being deprived of supports or even teachers. We want a diversity of opinions on our board as well, but it does need to run more smoothly and more civilly. As one parent told me recently, make the board boring again. And Ritu and I are committed to that. I can control only my own actions, but I've always welcomed the chance to sit down with anyone, especially people I disagree with, to work toward a consensus solution, to proceed forward with mutual respect, even if we disagree, and to lower the temperature in the room rather than escalating. This is what I do every day professionally, and we can certainly do it here. We are so lucky to live in these towns and to have this school system. And with your help and your support for Ritu and myself, again, spots 3 and 4 on the ballot, if your mail-in is right there in front of you, we can strengthen it and do better for all our kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Bill?
Yes, and thank you again, CCR, for holding this valuable debate. I have to say, the last thing I want to do is be a boring board. We want to be the most dynamic and engaging board possible. And that's what the Students Come First ticket is set out to do. You know, in many ways, the Students Come First ticket represents the diversity this community values. Nubia is a Black woman with multiracial children. Regina is Asian, and her children represent 2 of the most underrepresented and least discussed minority groups in the district, Asians and Hispanics. I'm a white man who grew up here, married to a Brazilian woman of color, and raising multiracial kids who speak more Portuguese than English at home. But let me be clear, as board members, we are going to do more than just look like the diversity we want. Commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion are simply empty window dressing if we're not holding the Board of Ed and the district accountable to lift up students who have historically been left behind. Our slate will do that by bringing independent thinking and a spirit of collaboration to the Board of Ed. Thank you so much, and have a good, thank you.
Thank you, Bill. And Regina?
Yes, thank you to the Community Coalition on Race and to the audience for tuning in tonight. I'd also like to thank Nubia and Bill for joining me on this journey. Truly could not be doing this without you. By bringing a balance of voices to the board, as Nubia, Bill, and I will do, we will create greater opportunities for a discussion of various viewpoints and ideas. We are, after all, not always even 100% aligned with each other on how to approach things. But we value diversity in the workplace because of the experiences and viewpoints that people bring to the table. My family represents 2 cultures and minority groups that are not often seen in SOMA, Asian and Hispanic. Bill and Nubia both have mixed race families, and Nubia is a strong woman of color. We hope our presence on the board will allow for a range of experiences and ideas to be considered in what our work is and how we approach it. The Students Come First ticket has always been honest about some of our most pressing challenges. You know, the reality is we are facing a lot of the same problems we've faced for many years now. But despite those challenges, we are hopeful about the exciting opportunities for change that we've discussed here tonight. We have a true opportunity to build a foundation for a district that can be innovative and forward-thinking. We believe that our district has the potential to provide the educational and social emotional experiences that our children deserve, to inspire and engage staff, and to make the community believe in this board again. We believe in public schools and we believe in this public school district. So we please ask you to vote by November 8th. Vote Eckert, Wilson, and Gifford, positions 1, 2, and 5 on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina, and thank you to all our 5 candidates tonight. Now I'm going to turn things over to Nancy Gagne, who is the Executive Director of the SOMA Community Coalition on Race, to close us out. Nancy?
Thank you, Tegan, and thank you, SOMA MAPSO community members, for attending and taking time out to learn tonight more from the candidates so that you can make an informed vote. We hope you heard responses that speak to our concerns about school success for all students with a focus on racial equity and integration. I want to thank the schools committee for hosting and for their consistent work and commitment to equity and excellence for all students. Thanks to the candidates for stepping up. It's one of the hardest community jobs imaginable, and I know from prior experience, so I applaud you for even putting your hats into the ring. The Community Coalition on Race works on racial equity and inclusion in all aspects of community life. We are a 501c3. We welcome more volunteers and donations. We can't do this work without either one of those, and we hope that you will join us. Please visit our website, communitycoalitiononrace.org, to support our work and to see about upcoming events, 2 of which I want to just make a quick mention of. The schools committee is also hosting a very important effort, one of our signature events, Conversations on Race, on November 15th. You do need to be pre-registered for that. It is on the very important issue of critical race theory, what it is, and what we think about this as a community, and why it's important to be aware of what it is in the state and in our towns. And also we are delivering our demographics report based on the 2020 census. It's focused, I heard some people referencing the demographics reports tonight, and we know that there's been some misinformation or confusing information, but we think we have some good information to give to the community about integration, diversity in the towns compared to other communities and at the community tract level. So that is in early December, I believe December 7th, but communitycoalitiononrace.org, check out our website and you'll get all of that information. And again, thank you all and best of luck to everyone. Oh, vote. To all of the people who are still here, don't forget to vote and tell your friends to vote.
Thank you.
Thank you all
Good
so
night,
much.
everyone.
Thank you. Have
Thank you
a
so
great
much,
night.
everybody.